might help. February 26th study session to order at 6 p.m. And I will call up Jason to. All council members are present. Is that what you wanted? All council members are present, so I will turn it over to Jason Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before we get started, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. I wanted to remind the public that this is a study session, which means we will not be taking public comment for our rules. That also includes any virtual public comment or responding to virtual comments or questions that we receive. So I just wanted to remind the viewing public and those here in the room of that. The first item on tonight's business agenda is the RV dump station. I'll turn it over to Public Works Director Michael Kosa, who will present on that.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Michael Kosa, the Public Works Director. And I am actually going to turn this over and introduce Mr. Ryan Johnstone. Mr. Ryan Johnstone is the Deputy Public Works Director in charge of operations. So a similar position to Elisa Haber Ayala, who you've seen in the past as city engineer. They're both Deputy Public Works Directors. So Ryan is new in the last month here and recently hails from his tenure at the city of Bonnie Lake. He has about 23 years of experience in the engineering field. So happy to turn it over to him, and he's happy to discuss and get involved in our RV dump station. It's one of his first tasks. So a very exciting one to hand off, and he'll be presenting to the group tonight. Thank you. Without further ado, Brian.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Council, Mayor. This evening, obviously, we're going to be going through a presentation on the RV waste receiving station. A couple of things that we want to make sure that we cover this evening in our presentation is I want to be able to give you some background first, understand what the intent of the station was originally versus how it's being utilized now. And then I want to discuss briefly what the potential risks are to the wastewater treatment facility based on that current use. Further, we want to talk compliance because the current use as it's being used now is not in compliance with regulations and what would be allowed for a station such as it's currently being used. And then what our upcoming action is and what staff recommends a path forward for the station is. Just by way of some background, the RV station was installed as part of a 2015 project. The intended use was for Sumner residents who own RVs. So the anticipated waste would be domestic type waste that you would see from a weekend of camping or something of that nature. It was envisioned that even though the facility wasn't fenced, that there is no controlled access, that it would be day use only. Back up 1, 2, it jumps forward several. There we go. The next background slide. So its current use is actually similar to a hauled waste receiving station, which is different than an RV waste receiving station. So not only the difference is that not only is it used by RV owners now statewide, we see users from as they're traveling through Sumner, heading to other parts of the state, they're using this facility. It's also being routinely used by carpet cleaners, food trucks, and so on to dump waste that's generated during those activities. Also used by businesses and individuals who have portable tanks that could be filled with any kind of waste. That's part of the problem here is we don't know exactly what is always getting dumped into the RV station. And it's, as I pointed out earlier, it's an unmonitored 24 access station. So there are people dumping there at times. We have no idea what could be ending up in there. We have heard reports of box trucks that have pulled up that the back end is full of 55-gallon drums of we don't know what, and that is being disposed of in that location. So knowing that we're seeing those types of uses, what is the potential risk to the wastewater treatment facility? Obviously, this is at times a higher strength waste than we had originally planned on being disposed of at this facility. Some of the risks to the wastewater treatment facility include the biological process, inhibition of the process. you could see things disposed of there that would, in simple terms, hurt the bugs that are helping us in our wastewater treatment plant. They could send the system into shock, which would then basically prevent wastewater from being adequately treated, which could result, the second bullet point there, in untreated sewage being introduced into the river. And then finally, the last bullet point there is our solids management. Currently, we treat the solids generated at the plant to a level called Class A, which means it can then be made available to residents for use as a soil amendment on their yards and so on. If we lose our process, we will no longer be able to generate solids that meet the Class A requirements. It would be something called a Class B, which means it would then have to be disposed of in a different manner, which is loaded into trucks and shipped off to most commonly there are sites in Eastern Washington where Class B solids can be land applied. That is a very costly process and intensive in that it results in the need to truck this stuff to the other side of the state. Let's see. Oh, okay. So knowing that and knowing how it's being used, knowing what the risks are, one of the options is to bring this facility into compliance as a hauled waste receiver station. So what does that look like? Quickly, what it means is that we would either need to take the station where it is now and move it to a more secure location, or we need to make it more secure where it's currently located. That would involve fencing and gates and so on. We would need to determine the kind of waste that's being received, and a permit would need to be developed that would guide exactly what we can do with the waste we're receiving, how it gets treated, and how it gets disposed of. That involves ongoing sampling and analysis. We would have to make sure that we're continually doing compliance monitoring, that we're staying in check with the requirements of the permit for the facility. And then there's discharge control. So we'd have to implement a source tracking system, which at a high level means that we would have to know first who is going to be using the facility. They would have to register with the city. We would then have to verify when they show up exactly what it is they're going to be disposing, and then have to monitor and ensure that they're staying in compliance with the agreement that they have with the city for the discharge of their waste. There are other civil improvements necessary to make this happen. There would be a need for additional tank storage in the ground, serve as an equalization basin so that when we receive large volumes, it gets metered out into the plant without a big slug flow of the wastewater going into the plant. There'd have to be some pumping systems. There'd have to be some pre-treatment to capture all the plastics and everything else that rocks that invariably ends up in this kind of a disposal situation. So we quickly estimated a cost to retrofit at about $1.5 million. An annual operational cost of about $200,000. This would have to be a staffed facility in addition to power and all the other stuff that goes into making something like this function appropriately. So that's to bring it into compliance. Did I skip one? No, I guess that is the next one. So knowing what we're up against as far as costs are concerned, staff is recommending that the station be closed. The projected cost to close the station would be a one-time cost of approximately $15,000. However, it does eliminate the need to do all of those things we just went through as far as bringing it into compliance, the monitoring and everything else. Currently, what we're proposing is that this the station would stay in service through the end of the year. But during that time, we would communicate closure. So we want to make sure that the local community is engaged, that they understand what the intent is, why we're doing it, and when this is going to happen. So we came up with some steps here in order to hopefully adequately engage the community with messaging. We do have a large sign that we would put at the facility itself that says, this is the date, this is what's going on, and what the users can expect to see moving forward. The directional signs that lead the public to the facility would be removed. We would notify local RV sellers, as they're a conduit for this kind of information. Obviously, when you buy a trailer, an RV, oftentimes you're asking the salespeople, well, where can I go to dump this out? And so they are a conduit for that information. We want to make them aware. And then in addition to that, we would want to leverage our social media, print newsletter, and our e-news to get the message out as well. Extending beyond the local community, as I said, we do see users from across the state. We want to then engage some of the internet resources that we've seen out there. There are websites that exist that inventory dump stations and where they're available. And currently the Sumner site is one of those that pops up on there. So we would want to engage with those sites and make sure that they have the appropriate information, they know what's going on, and that the site would be removed from our site would be removed from their website in time so that it wasn't misdirecting people there after the station is closed. And with that, it's a fairly brief presentation, so we've reached the end of it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions, Councilmember Patel?
So where's the closest dump station from here? And then, you know, we have like 8 or 10 months or 9 months until the end of the year. So how are you going to prevent some of those large, disposing people in dumps? You know, how are you going to prevent them from happening as best you can for the next 9 months?
Yes, thank you for the question. So to address the first part of that, we do know that the state has RV disposal sites available at various rest areas up and down the I-5 corridor that are available for use. Those are the closest ones that I'm really prepared to talk about. As far as the use of the facility until we get to the closure, it will take some diligence on the part of staff to just keep an eye on the facility. But frankly, other than the messaging that we have in the signage and what's going out to the public, that risk is still there. So we just need to be diligent and make sure that if we do see anything that looks suspicious, we're getting out there and attempting to turn those people away, those users away.
Is there a camera at the site?
We do have a camera and so it's, the treatment, the RV dump station is right next to the wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of dedicated staff members that are very aware of it and aware of folks that are kind of rolling up and, during daylight hours when we have staff on they might notice somebody who's rolls up with a box truck and that's where we heard about the box truck and the 55-gallon drums. There's a lot of folks that roll up with a 250-gallon tote, which is quite a bit of liquid. If you think about that on a vehicle. So there's a little bit of monitoring that they just try to police a little bit. It's not really their job,
Right.
but it threatens the plant. So they try to just kind of go up and say, hey, what are you doing? This is for RVs, but that's not really their primary role. So if we catch them and we try to have a conversation with folks and try to encourage them to do the right thing. Additionally, we are planning on upping our signage. We already have purchased another sign that has a lot more. We could have some signage right now, but with a bigger sign that really says RV use only, and you can't, none of those other types of folks should be using the site. And it mentions that it's against city code, some of those elements that we really didn't have on the signage.
Okay, all right, well, thank you.
Councilmember Cole.
Hi, thank you. I really like the public communication campaign. I just think it's great. I think it's really important. So I think that I am happy to see that and good work on that. And I have a question about sort of what fees might be for, if you know this. So the city of Sumner provided that service free of charge, monitored, and I saw all of that. But I know that there are sites out there, as you mentioned, and those sites are probably already, there are probably a number of sites that are in compliance with this waste haulers program, and so are their services free or is there a fee involved? And that's what they're going to have to look forward to those who want to use that service after December 31st.
So as far as RV waste disposal stations are concerned, the ones that I'm familiar with that are at the rest areas, those are free.
Okay.
Beyond that, I don't know what the fee structure may look like for any others beyond those.
Okay.
I
All
can
right. I was just.
Speak from my experience, most of the private ones are between $5 and $10 per use.
Okay. Okay. That's not bad. Thank you. That's it.
Councilmember Elfers.
Can you elaborate on the 1.5 million cost to retrofit, what that includes, and then the $200,000, like, because it just was curious if there's different ways to scale that. It seems like there could be two or three options in there that would be option A, B, or C, and I just was curious what was included in that, and if there's other things that we could kind of shrink it down or put different hours on it or things like that.
And sure, I'll lead off here, and Michael, if you want to join in, feel free. So the 1.5 million basically encompassed securing the site, so access control, full fencing. It included the civil improvements that I talked about, where there would be the installation of tankage pumping systems. That includes, the idea of some pretreatment facilities in order to sort out the waste before it's entering into the treatment plant. In addition to that, it includes the cost to set up the monitoring program and set up the back end. There will be computer and software needs to facilitate the registering and tracking of wastes and the sampling and so on. So that was where approximately the $1.5 million number came from. I don't know if you have anything further on that particular number.
I mean, we kind of did a ballpark that was based on the need. I mean, we would be digging up a good chunk of that parking lot to put in a tank. So it's not like a simple process. It's not like we could just, add a tank to the side. Odds are we'd be going in, digging up a larger portion of that trail parking lot. It would probably be, a couple months that area would be down. But anytime you're excavating and then having to re-asphalt, kind of put everything back together the way it was, that'd be one thing. The other thing would be fencing. We'd have to have fencing, and then we would have to determine, but most likely we would have some sort of automated system where it would lock up at certain times or not allow people to use it kind of at off hours. So that we could have more control on the site. So it's pretty much what he was saying. It's maybe a little bit different way of thinking about how much earthwork you'd have to do to get that tank in there. And then we'd have to be adding a pump or some sort of control so that when that tank needs to be drained and released into the system. Right now, there is literally a pipe that you dump your waste into, and it goes, and there's a pipe that straight goes right into the side of our Headworks facility. So there's absolutely nothing between somebody dumping something in there and the front of our treatment plant. And that is what the regulations really say. You can't do that. You need to have some sort of holding system. If you have a large load of something that shouldn't be, what I like to think about bleach. If somebody came in and dumped a 55-gallon drum of bleach into the system, we need to be able to stop that and make sure that it does not get into our plant, because our plant has a whole bunch of a big biological system. Bleach is going to kill a whole bunch of our bugs, which is how we make sure that the waste is treated. So that's the reasoning behind why a holding tank is really important here. Talking about the maintenance and operation, the $200,000. We didn't have a great way of estimating that, but we knew there would be a significant amount of staff time. In order to meet the requirements of a hauled waste facility, we would essentially have to have some sort of card system that we would issue to users, because everybody who uses that facility would have to have, they'd have to be known to the city, so that if somebody does do something and put something in there that they shouldn't, we could go back through our records and say, all right, where did that happen and who was dumping at that time, so that we could go back and understand who the person was that did not dump RV waste. So that would be a requirement. We know that a card system and technology, which has to be replaced every few years, it feels like, would be another burden on staff, and it would also be a financial burden just to maintain a system that we have nothing like right now. It's not like we could just expand one of our existing systems to do that. It would be a whole new system we would have to be looking into purchasing. It's kind of how we couched it. So we kind of looked at that and said, maybe in that $200,000 range would be a fair budgetary number.
And okay, thank you. And then what is the $15,000 for closing it include? What's included in that cost?
So initially, I mean, obviously, what some of the things we're including in there is time spent for, as signage, messaging and so on. There will be some physical improvements that need to happen in order to decommission the site. Currently, there's some equipment out there to be able to dispense water to help clean things up. There's the open hole that is the pipe that goes to the plant. We'll need to seal that up. There will be potentially the installation of some concrete curbing to help close off that area where that pad used to be, where the pipe is at. Various activities like that. 15,000 is probably appropriate again, just for the conversation that we're having. It is not a lot of work, but not insignificant either. So we felt like 15,000 was fairly appropriate for what we're talking about.
What is what's the cost of just like, if you just wanted to secure the area and keep people from abusing it and not officially close it, but keep it from being accessed, would that be an option too? Can I defer it? Cause we got a timeline on here. Is that because of the state requirements or? I asked two questions, sorry.
Well, I think when you look at kind of I don't know if we'd call it just a middle ground approach, that many of the things that we've presented here tonight would still have to be met. So you would still have to pay for somebody to be out there during the times that it is open. And we still, by securing it, we still have you are able to close off the nighttime usage that may be occurring, but you're still going to have some improvements there to handle the waste that is coming in. That's part of the problem that we have now, is that the infrastructure really isn't appropriate for the use. There should have been perhaps some improvements included up front in order to make it appropriate, and those would still be necessary regardless. So in the end, you still end up spending a fairly significant sum of money even to keep it open on kind of this, I don't know, middle approach, if you will. And so we believe that given the potential risks to the wastewater treatment facility, the wiser approach is to just close it down at the end of the year and eliminate those risks altogether, because those will be costly if we encounter those.
And regarding the timeline part of the question, I think staff really mulled over this to say, well, should we just close it? If we're going to recommend closing it, should we just have it closed immediately, or what should we do? We kind of weighed the benefits of a sooner closure with also the benefits of waiting really through a cycle of when people use the facility, especially RV users use the facility. That's a summertime activity for a lot of folks, and we would be making sure our signage is very clear, saying this station's closing at on December 31st. Really helps us get the message out, because everybody who's showing up there, if you've come here after the decision here is made, it's going to be communicated to you that you're not going to be able to come here next year, and that's really the goal. We also were considering what would people do if they came here and they just said closed, go away. There's a way to kind of convey your feelings about that. We don't want people dumping whatever they want just in our parking lot. So that was definitely a concern of ours, but we wanted to communicate it as much as we could, and then make sure that we try to make it as little inconvenience to the public as possible, and so they can plan and be ready for it.
And just to add on to that, staff really didn't take this decision lightly. As a RV owner myself, having used that facility, it sure is convenient and nice to have available. But one of the things that we had to consider too is that while closing, it does impact a specific group of users. If there is an issue with the larger treatment process at the plant, that is going to be something that impacts two whole communities. And I think that at the end of the day, we have to consider the greater good that is done by closing it to ensure that the treatment plant can continue to function as it should without any interruptions to service, any not accidental, but any discharges to the river that may result, because of untreated wastewater.
So my thought is, from what you're telling me, the risk is it seems like you'd want to close it quicker and then spend more time figuring out if there's an alternative. And that could be kind of my opinion. My approach would be like, hey, let's close it in 30 days avoid the risk of it and then make it not accessible and then kind of spend a little more time looking at options, maybe getting feedback from people. And so I guess that to me, I was thinking like, the December 31st, it feels like if people have a lot of waste that they're sitting at home and they're like, hey, I'm trying to figure out what to do with this. And they start realizing, oh, I better go down. They could just dump a ton of stuff because you're giving them a lot of time. So I'm just trying to figure out, to me, a temporary close it right away, pretty short notice, and then sit on it for a second, to me, seems like an approach that I would prefer if I had. Anyways, I was just curious if that's a reason why we wouldn't do that.
I will say there is definitely risk by keeping it open. The longer you keep it open, the more risk that something goes down that pipe that we don't want going down that pipe. And not to be pessimistic, but we also just announced what a bad 50-gallon thing of bleach would do to our plant in a public meeting. And that's not well known to everybody. So that is something that council may want to consider, is closing it earlier. But I do feel that from a transparency standpoint, that does not give the public a whole lot of time to weigh in on this. I can tell you our next action for council is going to be you all considering a resolution next week, directing staff to move forward with closing this at the end of the year. If you want to move that date up, we're comfortable doing that to something maybe 30, 60, 90 days out. I want to just be upfront with you that, you know, that doesn't give us a lot of time to communicate it to the ultimate end users.
Just some frame of reference, I guess, on these large weekends. Memorial Day, Labor Day, we'll see upwards of 70 vehicles. People streaming in all weekend. And then all week, you know, we're probably seeing 20 to 30 vehicle, RV vehicles throughout the summer. So it's an impact to a number of users. I don't know how many of those are Sumner residents, but they all show up here and expect to dump their load of sanitary sewage. Hopefully most of them would take their sanitary sewage with them, but if we don't notify them in any way other than, you know, 30 to 60 day window, I don't think they're all going to get the message. We will definitely reach out to as many outlets as possible before we do. We definitely want to get the date finalized. If it's not going to be the end of the year, we want to make sure we're communicating the right date.
Okay. And then I think one thing I just to clarify, so is there a way to close it without decommissioning again? Just like say, hey, we're going to close it as of maybe the after Memorial Day weekend, and then we're not going to decommission it yet because we're still like, we'll let people give feedback. Is that the reason why we wouldn't do it separately instead of like making the final decision?
I mean, there's always a way to, you know, probably not come back and pave over it entirely, but there's some sort of stopgap way of doing it. But we'll have to come back and determine how we'd like to close it more permanently, or if there's a desire or an avenue to reopen it in some modified capacity.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. This brings to mind a couple of movie lines. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and if you build it, they will come. I think it's ridiculous that we are having this discussion. I think we should close it as soon as possible. You would make the residents uphill from that place very happy because they don't just dump stuff. I'm not talking about you and other prudent users, but a lot of liquid trail going up the hill. It's ridiculous. It is unfortunate that in this day and age, people find it convenient to abuse the system by dumping 55-gallon drums of stuff in there or whatever. Back several years ago, before I moved here, I had a trailer and a place on Whidbey Island. And so Memorial Day, I'd take it over and come back. And if the place I was normally going to dump it in was closed, I'd find someplace else. I wouldn't figure to dump it anywhere. And a prudent RV owner should be able to do that. I like what Jason said about giving a prudent communication. I think we learned a little bit of a lesson recently about that. But I am all in favor of moving forward on this as quickly as possible.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
You wanna go?
Councilmember Bowman?
Hi, thanks, you guys. That was a good presentation. So just a couple of questions. Did I hear you say the reason we should close it is because of compliance? To make it compliant there, and just a simple answer, to make it compliant, if you look at your slide here, number 7, it's not compliant right now.
Correct, because
Okay.
it's being used as a hauled waste
Right,
receiving station.
so it's not compliant.
Mhm.
And then the other question I would ask in slide number 6, it talks about exposure to high strength waste and toxic pollutants. Has anybody dumped anything in it to date that they shouldn't have? That you can tell?
I don't think we've had anything specifically that, that the wastewater treatment plant was able to detect as a
To decipher?
major problem. When we do have our weekend of folks lining up
Uh-huh.
for use, there's definitely an effect on the plant. You
Right,
can see that there is a higher strength of waste coming in and that they do modify a few things for that, but we haven't really had any really
toxic type.
currently we haven't really had that.
And so that was gonna be another question I was gonna ask. How many gallons a year comes in through that? Do you know?
We had we've done some work to get some numbers on that. I don't have that. We kind of ballparked some
Okay.
of that, but we could provide that next week.
I would just, it might be something out of curiosity. I too have used that dump station, but I wasn't a Sumner City resident, right? And so we would travel down this way heading home and dump it off in there. So I understand your concern of wanting to let people know. But I think to Councilman Stewart's position that he just took, a prudent RV owner isn't gonna just pull their hose out and dump stuff there, right? They're gonna go, dang it, I wish this wasn't closed, and they're gonna travel up to I-5 or something. So then I would wonder if you could find that stopgap measure, maybe a way to lock it up. I would just suggest locking it up and maybe just for a couple of months while communication's going out there. Somebody has to hit a buzzer bell or something. I know the guys are all working inside the facility to unlock it and let people, dump in there, just a small space. If that's a concern that you think people would dump things that they shouldn't. But I certainly wouldn't wait either if it's a compliance issue and if it's a safety issue to the wastewater treatment, because everything runs right in. I think it's more of an emergent need than it is, I wouldn't be shy to close it down just because of maybe communication on maybe some other issue that's occurred here. I would just do the right thing, right? Do the right thing. That's what you have to focus on. What's the right thing? So communicate it, do the right thing, close it. Personally, I don't want to spend $200,000 on it. I mean, I just can't justify. There's too many other things in town we need to focus on. That's just my thought. But thank you. It's a good presentation.
All right, Councilmember Brown?
Having a trailer for 20 years, I see the importance of dump stations. I also understand the situation we face. So at this time, I support closing it at the end of the year or sooner, as long as we have time to notify as many as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Barbara?
So in your communication, I would put on Traffic Avenue, the dump station is closed. It's not available. So that people aren't driving down there, because it is through a residential area and the less traffic is probably better for them. So that's my suggestion.
All right, anybody else? You good?
So Mayor, I'm hearing from a number of council members that you're comfortable moving a little bit faster than staff is proposing. I don't think that's a bad thing. As Councilmember Bowman mentioned, it is the right thing to do, and trying to weigh the public involvement with also the convenience is always something that we strive to do here. So next week you'll have a resolution in front of you. Staff is going to go back tomorrow and have some discussions, whether it's 60 or 90 days. sounds like all of you would be comfortable with something in that range. So we can put something together to, for you to vote on next week. Once again, it's a resolution directing staff to close it 60 to 90 days from now. Councilmember Alpers, we're happy to start looking at some temporary uses. I think staff wise, it's going to be very difficult to do something that's intermediary, even in the 60 to 90 day range. So.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
I think that I appreciate what Andy said, and I'm right there with him. But as soon as you said it's a direct, no pun intended, pipeline straight in, that does become an issue. And it's a compliance issue and potentially a safety issue for the people that work in that wastewater treatment plant, depending on what gets dumped in there. I mean, I've been in there with you guys and it's not a pleasant smell right now. It kind of burns your nose. So, you know, if the wrong stuff gets in there, it could be a dangerous thing. I mean, really, to what you're saying, and as much as we hate to say it, there's people that probably aren't as forthright that might be dumping barrels of stuff in there. So I get it.
Anybody else? No? Did you get what you needed?
Yep.
All right, we will move on to city administrator report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things on my report tonight. First off,
You guys.
I sent out an email to all of you last week about Rainier View Park. We did open the playground on Friday, but we are having an official ribbon cutting for that playground on next Monday at 4:30 p.m. I also want to report that the Public Works Committee meeting has been canceled. That was scheduled for March 5th. And lastly, I just got an email from one of our lobbyists, House Bill 2160, which is the transit-oriented development. This is the bill that would require the city to allow 3.5-story buildings within a half-mile of the Sounder commuter rail station, as well as prohibit the regulation of off-street parking and create mandatory minimums for affordable housing. Is officially dead for this legislative session. It did not make it out of committee today. So staff and the mayor spent considerable time, as well as our lobbyists, working to make sure that that did not pass. So we're very pleased with that outcome. I am told, though, it will likely be back next year, so we'll be on it again. That's all for my report tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Any questions? All right. Agenda setting, any council meeting issues from anybody? Seeing none. Any committee meeting issues? Seeing none, we're all good. We have no executive session. So I will adjourn this meeting at 6:38.